In this second portion of our Tell Beit Mirsim study, we'll take a look at photos that are available in the Annual of the American Schools of Oriental Research. It's the 1936 edition, which is volume 17. This is an entire volume. This is an annual devoting its entire volume to this report from William Foxwell Albright. Incidentally, if you're looking for this within our seminary system, sometimes I found it's helpful when you're presented with the initial library search to go to journals. It's on the same dialog page as you are offered databases. Instead, try journals and then enter Annual of the American Schools of Oriental Research. It will give you a whole series of years of volumes, and then you can drill down into 1936 and you'll find volume 17. So here are the plates that Albright included with that report. You can get a sense of the general terrain, in fact looking at the tell. Here's the layout of the research camp. If you're curious what William Foxwell Albright looks like, in the upper group photo, the caption helps us recognize that among the seated figures, the second from the left, so he's wearing a light-colored suit, dark tie, and he has very roundish glasses. That's Professor Albright. Some of these plates will pass through without comment. Part of the code that's employed here, as you look at the caption A, stratification of deposits below the latest city wall in the southeast, 24 and 14. Now these designate particular quadrants of the site sketch. Later on you'll see an egg-shaped site sketch that gives quadrants. It's all grid patterned. There's a northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast quadrants, and each of them are divided into squares that have codes. 24 is one in the southeast, another would be 14. So that's how you're able to orient these. Once again, as you look at the sketch of the overall site, you'll find that there are two gates, one at about 11 o'clock and one at about 5 o'clock. So there, the 11 o'clock gate would be considered the western gate. The one down at 5 o'clock is the eastern gate. The photo at the top is giving us a picture of that eastern or right-hand gate looking out to the south. What we have here are two shots of roughly the same zone. I invite you to study the captions and see if you can figure out which photo represents a later habitation, which photo represents the earlier habitation. Take a moment to sort that out. If you concluded that the bottom photo is the later habitation and walls, and then as they peeled away, for example, that middle horizontal dividing wall between those two circular, are they post bases, or not sure exactly what they represent, but after that was removed, then they had a pavement of flooring within this house that corresponded to a larger or undivided anyhow house with perimeter walls that would be the earlier level, the G level. This represents levels D and then lower E. I find what's helpful here is to appreciate how compact these cities were, these towns were. Helpful to observe that one Lane is considered a street, and then you have it flanked by these houses, and they are fairly small. Here's an interesting feature, a drainage channel in the time frame of stratum D. Again, in level D, they identified a particular territory or structure as substantial enough to perhaps be a royal residence. This is quadrant SE, block 22. Notice the destruction indicated in the upper zone, all this pottery that has been crushed. Could be a variety of reasons. Could it be that there is a roof that has collapsed? That would be one explanation, except there's an awfully large amount of pottery. Another explanation would be that pottery has been discarded. There are certain places where they find accumulations, basically a trash dump of discarded broken pottery. Which is the case in this instance, I'm not sure, but just want you to be aware of interpretive possibilities for a large quantity of broken pottery. These photos date to very early in the excavation process, don't they? May of 1926, and we're concentrating on outer walls. A revetment is a reinforcement. Notice here in caption A, most of the masonry belongs to the Iron Age, so that would fit with an early year of excavation. Iron Age was the top layer. I'd like to draw your attention to the lower photo here, because here we have a picture, a cross-section of what it looks like when they encounter a fallen roof. Notice concerning the left-hand photo, the caption indicates stratigraphic section in the southeast quadrant, locale number 3. Foxwell acknowledges that they did not use the Wheeler-Kenyon method. This was prior to that in the history of development of the archaeological, the excavation science. But he recognizes the value of that. So when they have at some locale within the excavation, they not accidentally, but shall we say at least incidentally, have a portion of the side of the excavation that still is intact, then they point out the different layers or different strata that are there. But you would not find the 5 by 5 meters, the waffle pattern, with the box retaining frequent strata cross-section in this particular excavation. That was a later refinement. Now in the photo on the right, isn't your eye rapidly drawn to the black oval there in the center, and the caption indicates this is an olive press, so a little piece of industry for cooking oil and fuel oil. Here we realize that periodically they will encounter human remains, whether it would be a catastrophic, a sudden death, or whether an incidental, immediate interment just by collapse, or whether it would be a purposeful, methodical burial. And potsherds giving witness to both various decoration forms. Notice 28 and 29 and 30, there's some painting patterns, and also shapes of fragments that would begin to give a hint of what was the complete vessel like. Notice please the upper piece. There'll be a sketch in the next photo that it endeavors to complete and fill out this, what Albright suggested was a serpent goddess. Some of the artifacts of a symbolic nature were reinterpreted later to be a figure of a leader. His thought on this one initially was that it was a deity representation, fragmented. And below, game pieces. Here's the artist's reconstruction of what he thinks the full artifact may have looked like. And how about this figurine of a lion? I must confess, I wish when I look at something like this that they had laid a rule alongside so I would appreciate what the dimension is. It's always a useful thing to do. So if you get into archaeology, when you take photos, put a rule along. Earlier we saw the lioness shallow libation piece that was located in the large building that also had some animal bones. So we inferred perhaps that's some kind of a cultic building. Here are two views of that same artifact. Now we get into some figurines of an Astarte sort. So they're sketches, and then there'll be some actual artifacts from which those are constructed. When I see things of this sort, it reminds me of the prophets and how they repeatedly said, folks, you've got to get rid of your idols. And so these are visual indicators of the direction that the false religion was drawing people, and which God regularly had to curb people to draw them back to himself in pure worship of himself. Otherwise they destroy themselves. More figure type palettes above, and then below we begin to get some of the identifier scarabs. It would be among these scarabs then that the Thutmosis and Amenhotep scarabs were identified. Some of these are clearly Egyptian in nature, particularly item 10 has hieroglyphs that are quite clear. Item 1 looks like hieroglyphs. Yes, they're of a simpler sort. And item 8, the central figures within the oval of item 8 are clearly Egyptian in nature. Item 11 has some pieces that look hieroglyphic, but they are rather simplified. Upper left, this would be the impression left by a cylinder seal. Items 1 and 3. Similarly 7. And it looks like 5 is 2, although it's less distinct. Beginning to get some profile shots, sections, aren't we? That's a feature that Petrie introduced. More scarabs on the left. Item 5 and 4 are clearly hieroglyphic in nature. Item 9 has some simplified hieroglyphs. 11 is also hieroglyphic. I tried, incidentally, to identify which ones were Amenhotep and which were Thutmosis. 5 has several features, several of the signs that correspond to Amenhotep, but I didn't find 100% equivalence. Bone inlay, so artwork of some sort. And that's level D1. Several fragments of that sort, levels D and also E. Earlier there were game board pieces, and here we have in the upper portion fragments that would have been assembled together to form a game board as they understand it. Spindle whorls are the upper collection, quite a few of these. Perhaps you're familiar with how these work. Imagine that you need from loose strands to develop twisted thread. So you're going to want to spin and spin and spin those fibers till they bind together and form a cohesive spiral. The spindle whorl gives you some mass at the bottom, so that as it begins to spin, the momentum of it helps to continue that spinning and helps to ease the formation of the twisted thread. A great deal of effort required just to make a piece of cloth, let alone sew it together into a garment. And now tools. On the left, axe heads and adze heads. And then various piercing devices, awls made out of bone. They're not distinguishing what strata all of these pieces come from. Some are identified and some are not. On the right, expressly copper weapons. Copper tools, ornaments. Here's a fascinating piece. Notice the cavity in these limestone pieces. These then supplied the mold into which molten metal could be poured to develop tools. Stone objects on the left. On the upper right, flint. And the lower right, loom weights. So here, not simply spindle whorls to keep the thread twisting, but rather once you've got the network of weaving threads, the warp, you need to keep those threads suspended with some tension on them so that you can weave in and out your cross threads. All right, here we have a topographical sketch, and this is actually assembled from 4 different sketch pages in the book. So if you study, there's a little misalignment at points. That's because I have assembled from 4 different sketches that were in parts in order to try and get them to match together. Now here is that design, that sketch of the site proper. And notice the caption. These are walls of layer A. Bedrock level. So this would be level J, wouldn't it? These are levels F, G, and H. Quickly you can appreciate that there is a very thick outer wall, and then we have some housing walls, some narrower walls. Level E. A little bit later, level D. While viewing these on the one level looks repetitious, I hope that just seeing these helps us to appreciate the detailed sketching that goes on as they endeavor to preserve the record layer by layer of what they've discovered. So this is level C. Notice several circular structures. I believe this is what Albright means when he writes, during the period of abandonment between the end of the Hyksos town and its reoccupation by the inhabitants of stratum C1, C was broken by him into several layers, sublayers, a number of storage pits were sunk into the earth. So that's what he's referring to in his article, these circular pits. And here they're seeking to preserve the cross-section in certain locales. The upper two sketches would be vertical views, top-down views at the intersection of the quadrants that you see, 42, 43, 52, 53. That's the four corners of four little zones. So those are top views, whereas at the bottom right you see section cross views. One particular structure is shown here at level D, and notice the reference. Underneath the structure you see a large X and then a 33. That should help us locate it on the map. There are a couple of other X's. The top is one with a 22 tucked in. And these are part of section southeast. I trust as the course progresses, you will become, shall we say, sketch literate. You will be able to open up an excavation report and feel like you know how to get oriented with some detailed plan, and then be able to identify any unusual features or just appreciate how a house or an unusually large structure, was it a palace, was it a temple, how it was laid out. Notice the structure on the left, and in the longer vertical room, notice the three rounded indicators. I wonder if that is the one particular photo that we saw earlier with three. They look like foundations, or were they some pits for working something? Were they foundations of pillars? Hard to say. At least with my limited understanding, I'm not sure what they are. Some seal impressions, level C. At this point, I'm going to invite you to experiment with locating this photo, this particular house, on the vertical sketch. So here we have a photo. This is from the encyclopedia article by Albright. Notice the era, caption, it's iron 2, and notice where in the oval of the sketch map you should look for this. Okay. Here's the sketch map. Are you going to look in the eastern portion? That would be down below, or are you going to look to locate this in the western portion? Oh, by the way, notice which level this sketch is preserving up at the top. Which level and which era. Very important that we try and correlate items within the same era, right? Iron 2. And here's the caption again on the photo, iron 2. So these two correspond. Give you a minute to just take a look at the sketch on the left and see if you can play a mind game and locate it. If you want more time, pause the video. Perhaps it would help if we rotated the sketch. Notice we've just spun it. Try a different angle. We're still interested in the western portion, which is now facing out at 3 o'clock. Does that help you overlay the photo onto any of those foundation plans? I wonder what it is about the photo that you're looking for in the foundation plans. What points of correlation? Same thing, just zooming in on the sketch a bit more. I wonder if you were looking for these rather close proximity parallel walls. Is that something that you were hunting for? Were you watching for an opening, a gate at this position? One candidate would be where the red square is on the left. We've got a couple of parallel walls. We've got a gate. What do you think? Are we facing through the gate, looking at the red square with the parallel walls on the left? Admittedly, the pillars, these posts that stick up in the middle, these pieces do not appear in the sketch, and I don't see them anywhere on the sketch, so we're left without that. We're only given genuine foundation walls. Or perhaps it was the second red square that caught your attention. For after all, we've got parallel walls, and the gateway, the opening to the doorway, I should say, is properly oriented. There's one more feature that we should watch for. Notice at the back of the wall, all of these, the accumulation of, is it debris or is it part of another wall? Would that correspond to the casemate wall? It almost looks in the photo, doesn't it, as though there are two layers of walls. I wish we had a vertical right here, a vertical photo. It's possible that might correspond to the other proposed house, because there is indeed a later wall behind the initial house wall in that one over at 9 o'clock as well. I must admit, my vote is for the house with the where I've indicated with the blue casemate wall, but I could be wrong. Here we're just zooming out, letting you see more of the sketch in case there are other elements that you wish to compare it to. Well, as we wrap this up, notice how Albright summarizes at least part of the contribution that the findings of Tell Beit Mirsim brought to the whole archaeological enterprise within Palestine. He writes that it presented the countries, that is Israel, Palestine's first clear ceramic chronology, corresponding to the Bible's patriarchal traditions. I would encourage you to look up these resources and read them over. Now you've had an introduction to the site. It should make digesting these resources a little bit easier. If you will do so, you will find your ability to navigate some of these scholarly resources just greatly enriched. Be sure to log the pages you read as part of the collateral reading for the course, so it's you get credit for it. But I would encourage you to do that.